Hi there, welcome to the LNU show. This is your host Priya, and today's topic is too close to my heart. I have struggled with making decisions almost all my life, and I still do, but now I've built a framework around making decisions to help me navigate through this crippling disease called indecisiveness. Okay, that was dramatic, but you get the idea. Thanks to this framework, I have been able to make timely decisions at work, in my personal life, and when it comes to taking steps towards building my future. I used it when I moved from Miami to Dallas to end a relationship, start this podcast, and a lot more. But before we get into the topic, real quick, if you haven't already liked or subscribed this channel, please do that so that you don't miss any update from me when I upload a new episode, which is every Sunday. It is a teeny tiny favor that I ask for. It takes less than 2 seconds of your time, but it does a huge favor for me. If and only if you want to go an extra step, I would love to get feedback from you. So please share that with me via comments, or you can DM me on Instagram and on TikTok at the LNU show. You can find them in the show notes, so you don't have to go very far to find me. See, I'm so thoughtful. This podcast is where I share my experiences and leave you all with tips and tools to optimize your life on topics ranging from mindfulness, spirituality, building habits that help with navigating a busy career, and creating your version of your dream life. All right, that's all the housekeeping items. Now let's get right in. I was reading an article a couple weeks ago and I came across this phrase called Buridan's ass. Buridan's ass is a philosophical paradox named after the 14th century French philosopher Jean Buridan, who believed that in the face of two equally good alternatives, a human could not make a rational choice. It illustrates a situation where a decision is impossible to make due to the presence of two equally attractive options. Relatable, right? I find myself in situations where I'm divided between two options because they're both equally good. For example, eat a pizza or a dosa. I'm torn. I'm so torn. Anyways, back to the paradox. It goes like this. Imagine a donkey or an ass, because the paradox is called Buridan's ass, that is placed exactly midway between two identical piles of hay. Both piles are equally tempting and equally distant from the donkey. According to the paradox, because the donkey cannot rationally choose between the two identical piles, it will continue to remain at its spot, unable to decide, and eventually starve to death. This paradox very beautifully highlights the limitations of rational decision making when faced with choices that have no clear differentiating factors. It is frequently used to discuss topics such as free will or the potential paralysis that can come from overthinking or having too many options. Of course, there will be times when decisions do not have to be made, or when one has the luxury to take the time for research, or, in corporate world have a ton of meetings and discussions. So there are different scenarios, but all I'm trying to say is that situations when you are torn between opportunities or options that are equally lucrative are way too common in our day-to-day life. So here is $1 million question. How do we make decisions when faced with fairly equal options? So here is $1 million question. How do we make decisions when we are faced with fairly equal options? I would love to know your thoughts and solutions to this question, but today I will share my framework with you all. But before we get into my framework, here are a few things that you need to know about decisions. Number one, there are two kinds of decisions. There is a one-way door decision and a two-way, the revolving door kind of decision. You need to categorize your point of decision into one of these two categories. Is the decision you are making a one-way door decision that you cannot come back from? or it is a revolving door or a two-way door kind of decision. And then you act accordingly. Number two, by not making a decision, you are really deciding to be inactive. What I'm trying to say is that indecision is actually a decision. Number three, there is no right or wrong decision. Most decisions are nuanced. You can weigh the pros and the cons of each side. At the end of the day, just trust yourself to make the best decision with the information that you have at that point of time and spend all your energy to make it the right decision for you. The next point is seeking permission or advice. Many times I find myself torn between options. I want someone to just read my mind, be that magical person, be the genie, and tell me what I should be doing and make it easy for me. But to be honest, many times we are not looking for an advice. We are looking for someone to take the agency away from us so that we have someone else to blame if we choose the wrong path. But as I said earlier, there is no right or wrong. The last point I would call out is discomfort. Stress can have a very significant impact on the decision-making process. When under pressure, people tend to make impulsive and irrational decisions. Humans are designed to avoid discomfort and pain, so our brains are wired to make a decision that most likely avoids that. Just because something will be uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's a wrong decision. All right, now it's time for me to let the cat out of the bag and share my golden 6-step framework with you all. It's actually a 5+1 step. The last step is kind of a bonus that, I like to do, but you can take it or leave it. So the first step is to identify the goals. One of the companies that I worked for in 2020, we spent months analyzing a problem to determine the right costs and resources for it and our approach as a team to hit the goals of the program. Everyone kept kicking the can and poking holes in the program. Now, because I was the program manager and it was primarily my responsibility to make sure that the team hits the goal, and by the time that we had committed to it, for the program to be called successful, I asked the tough question that no one wanted to ask. I asked the question, what is our actual North Star metric? And does the program get us there? There was silence in the room, mostly uncomfortable silence because the noise calmed down, and for once, everyone was thinking of reaching the finish line, the goal, and just to make sure that we were all taking steps toward our North Star goal. And we quickly realized that the program was not actually focused on the new customer growth, which at that point was the North Star goal. So we had to pivot. We had to make sure that we changed the priorities of the program, we changed the approach of how we were hitting that goal, and then streamline ourselves again. Now, that's a very corporate-y example. Let's look at another example that you may find more relatable. You go to work every day and feel frustrated. You decide that you need to quit. But when you stop and you look around at your personal values, you realize you value creativity above all else, but your current job has boxed you in. So again, the uncomfortable question here is, are you deciding whether to quit your job, or are you deciding how to unlock new ways to create? There is a difference. There is a big difference between those two. So take your time to properly identify what your real goal is and keep aligning to that. Now, step number 2 is determine all the possibilities. There is more than one tactic to consider when trying to meet a goal. In Hindi, there is a phrase that you can touch your nose in multiple ways. Either you choose to just directly touch your nose, or twist and turn your arm to reach it. I think I butchered the phrase, but you get the idea, right? Now that you know your goal, it's time to brainstorm all the possible ways to achieve it. My decision was not actually, should I leave my job? It was around the desire to create, have more upside, and be more in control. This could lead one to ask for a new role or a new project at work. This led me to launching my podcast. So all I suggest is that you sit down and you brainstorm all the ways you could get to your desired goal, your North Star. Incorporate, there are processes and there are set templates to land that proper decision. I built one for myself for work, and I call it a decision canvas, where what I do is that I lay out all the options that can help me achieve a particular goal, and then I list out all the pros and cons across each option, and then I list all the people or the teams that I consulted to list those pros and cons. And then I have a very clear decision maker and a date by when I need that decision to be made to continue progressing in my program. If you all are interested in trying out my decision canvas at your work, I will have a link to my free downloadable version in the show notes. So you can go there and you can download my decision canvas that I use at work. Well, coming back to my framework, step number 3. Now, it's time to weigh in the criteria. All the options that you list in your decision canvas now need to be stack ranked for the decision maker to easily understand which way the team is leaning towards. And in your personal life, what you do is you think of what's important to you. For example, for me, when I think of 5 things that are important are stability, autonomy, creativity, financial freedom, and control over my calendar. But when I stack rank them, they do not look exactly in that order. For example, the most important thing for me is control over my calendar. The second thing probably is autonomy, followed by financial freedom, creativity, and the least important is stability, because I am single and I'm in my mid 30s. I have more room to be, anywhere at a given time. So I don't need that stability. I don't have people depending on me to be fed. So that's something that I can focus less on. Now, that I have this criteria, it is my tool to help me with stack ranking the options that I listed in my decision canvas. So it's always advisable for you to have your criteria that you use to, weigh in your options in the decision canvas. Now, moving on to step number 4. Step number 4 is about considering the outcomes. Now, this step is almost as important as step number 1 because it will help you determine how your final decision will impact yourself and others that are involved or will be impacted by the decision. In this step, you ask yourself questions like, how will this decision affect you now? How will it affect your loved ones now? How will it affect you in the future? And how does it affect your loved ones in the future? This is an essential step because it allows you to review the pros and cons of the different options that you laid out earlier in step 2. It is also important because you want to feel comfortable with all your options and the possible outcome of whichever one you choose. Now that leads to the 5th step. The 5th step is my favorite step. Just step into the decision. One of the best advice that I ever received was live like you made the decision. What I mean by that, let me share a couple examples. Now, talking about the podcast, I started recording myself speaking on a microphone months before I actually launched this podcast. This gave me line of sight into the new rhythm of my week and what skills I would need to develop and to get good at it. I'm not great at it, but I'm better as compared to what I was when I first started. I'm learning, but now I'm more confident and I'm more comfortable than I was before. So I started living like I had made the decision of being a podcaster. I started becoming more comfortable with that decision by recording myself. Now, second example is, ending a relationship. Before I ended my last relationship, I started living like I didn't have a partner. I started walking my dog 2 times a day. I did my own groceries myself. I made my own coffee weeks before I ended the relationship. And that was me living like I had already made the decision. So these are my 5 key steps that I take to reach my decision. Just a quick revision. Step number 1 is identify the goals. Step number 2 is determine all the possibilities. Then you weigh in the criteria in step 3. Step 4, you consider all the outcomes. This involves you and your loved ones, all those who are impacted by that decision. And step number 5 is you stepping into the decision, you living like the decision has been made. Now, the final step is very optional, but I call it setting the decision in stone. Now, why I say it's optional is because if your goal is to make a decision, then you have already done it in first 5 steps. You're already living like it's been made. You're not required to, follow this step. But what I do is just to memorialize a decision, I like to journal it. I like to write down a few things like, what decision am I making? What got me there? What am I saying goodbye to? And what am I opening the door for? I love to write all of these things down, and that helps me get clarity into why I really wanted to make this decision. And it almost puts me at peace with that decision. But it doesn't end here. I take that note and place it somewhere that I'll never ever come across again. That's me saying that the decision is made, it's set in stone, and it's out in the world, and I'm not revisiting it. I'm just making sure that I'll make that the right decision for me. Very recently, I wrote a short note and I hid it somewhere in Machu Picchu when I was in Peru for my birthday earlier this year. So, that's an example. Oh, and there is another one. This is very interesting. When I was in Miami in 2019 for my interview with Uber, I did a whole day of interview rounds. Like, I think there were 8 hours of back to back interviews. I was meeting people from the team that I would be working with. And I was feeling great with the way the interviews went. I was very positive that I will get the position. But I also knew that there were more than 900 people who had applied for that position. So I knew that the competition was real. So after I knew that I had done my best, and now it's on the universe to make it happen if it was meant to be, what I did was I took out a small piece of paper from one of the notepads in my hotel room, and I wrote down the name of the position, followed by the name of the company, followed by my full legal name. And then I just went for a walk by the bay. And then I released the note into the ocean. And that was me just memorializing that decision and internalizing the fact that I already have that position and it's mine. 2 weeks later, I got a call that I got the position. And I know that it sounds very woo-woo, but this is something that I really like doing. Anyways, those are the steps that I take when I make a big decision. Big decisions mean you are playing a bigger game. You're doing great, so keep going. That's all I had for today's episode. I hope you all liked it. A quick reminder, if you haven't subscribed to my show on Apple Podcast or Spotify, please do so. It will definitely be the highlight of my weekend. Thank you in advance. You all lovely, lovely listeners. I hope that you all have an amazing weekend. I'll come back again next week with another episode. Till then, take care and bye.